Scotland sees the rain move through central and then finally northern parts before it turns to showers. And by the afternoon, actually, many places brightening up. There will be some spells of sunshine coming through, but also quite frequent and fairly lively showers arriving, particularly into western parts. Temperatures a few degrees down compared to recent days. They're edging back to around average for the time of year. But Sunday looks unsettled with another low moving in, further spells of heavy rain and strong winds with coastal gales. Monday, likewise, further spells of wet and windy weather.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point. Good morning, everybody. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and the one and only Inaya Falarin Iman. We are here all the way through until midday with a show full of all those big topics, those big guests, and things to get you talking.
Absolutely. Make sure you get in touch with your views as usual. GB Views at gbnews.uk. We'll be reading that all throughout the show. But first, it's time for the latest news.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. Here are the latest headlines. France's ambassador to the UK has been summoned to the Foreign Office as the row over post-Brexit fishing rights escalates. The row began after France complained of a lack of licences for French boats to fish in UK waters. France is yet to release a British scallop vessel detained yesterday, and French prosecutors say the boat's captain will be called to court next August. US President Joe Biden will meet Pope Francis at the Vatican today to discuss the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change and poverty. Mr. Biden arrived in Rome with his domestic finance bill back home in limbo. It's after his fellow Democrats abandoned plans to vote for the president's nearly $3 trillion spending plan. Joe Biden will meet privately with the Pope before wider talks begin. He will then travel to Glasgow for the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26. Insulate Britain activists have staged another protest this morning, gathering on the M25. Essex police say a number of people have blocked the road between junctions 28 and 29. The eco group claim 14 protesters have caused major disruption on the motorway in several locations. It comes after an injunction was put in place by the High Court banning the group from obstructing traffic. England could soon become the first country in the world to license e-cigarettes as a medical product to quit smoking. They're a step closer to being prescribed on the NHS for the first time under new plans. It comes after the British health regulator updated its guidance for people who want to quit smoking. They say e-cigarette manufacturers can now submit through the same approvals process as other medicines. And Facebook has officially rebranded itself as a wider company called Meta. It's designed to represent the social media network's expanding business plan into what they're calling the metaverse. That's an online world where people can meet, play and work virtually. The core Facebook service, though, will still remain unchanged. I'll have more for you in half an hour's time. Back to Patrick and Inaya.
Good morning, everybody. You are watching To The Point here on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Inaya Falarin Iman. And we've got a massive show for you today to drag you kicking and screaming into the weekend. So here's what's coming up.
Yes, well, the French ambassador to the UK has been summoned by Foreign Secretary Liz Truss as a row over the post-Brexit fishing rights escalate. We'll be talking to former MEP Anne Widdecombe.
Yes, Anne Widdecombe. As the COP26 climate conference gets underway in Glasgow this weekend, in our head-to-head feature, we'll be asking, will it actually make a difference?
And the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, has called on the government to make face masks mandatory in public transport. We'll have the latest.
Yes, we have all of that coming up and much, much more across the programme. And you can get in touch as well with your views on GBViews at gbnews.uk. But first, I'm going to give my views on a new government plan relating to gender laws. Easy for me to say. Adults who try to persuade children to change their gender will face criminal sanctions under government plans. From next spring, it will be illegal to convince someone to change their sexuality or gender identity, with extra safeguards to protect adolescents. I think this might be a rare bit of common sense. For too long, I feel like we've suspended logic and biological fact and hurtled headfirst into needless discussions about challenging traditional gender roles and identities. In order to not seem anti-trans, people feel the need to be a bit over the top when it comes to being pro-trans, in my opinion. Some people are born into the wrong body. Some people are attracted to people of the same sex. Some people want to change their sex. And all of those things are obviously fine. But do we really need resources being sold to primary schools for children as young as 5 years old that make them consider whether or not their genitals aren't right for them? It is, by definition, impossible to have that conversation with a 5-year-old and for them to understand it fully. There's no way that you can do that without confusing them. It's impossible. And I would argue that there's just no real need. The best estimate at the moment is that around 1% of the population might identify as trans, including people who identify as non-binary. So that would mean that there are about 600,000 trans and non-binary people in Britain out of a population of over 60 million. And that's a pretty generous estimate. Call me a dinosaur, but wouldn't children be better served by our education system if there was more of a focus on them learning things like, oh, I don't know, maths or geography or even Mandarin? I think parents have an absolute right to be angry if their school decides to discuss transitioning into a different gender with your very young child. But the problem is, if you went in to talk to the head teacher about it, you'd probably be labelled transphobic. What qualifies a lot of these teachers to have that conversation with your child? What qualifies Dorothy from the art department to talk to your 6-year-old child about whether or not they've been born into the wrong body? Nothing. There are numerous cases in this country of children with autism being prescribed puberty blockers or even having gender reassignment surgery. From what I can see, the notion of changing your gender is often presented to children like a change of clothes or dyeing your hair a different colour. But it's much more serious than that. It can have life-changing and irreversible consequences. I welcome this move to potentially outlaw trying to convince children to change their sex. Let kids...
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's a difference between sexuality and gender, and a difference between a child and an adult. I don't think that any adult should be able to coerce, convince, pressure or persuade a child that they're born in the wrong body or have the wrong sexuality. However, I think when someone becomes an adult, I think it's fine to make certain suggestions, and it's up to that adult to be able to make that decision for themselves. So I think the distinction has to be made. I wonder if this potential law will ban adults from making decisions or taking advice from other people. So they have to be very clear in terms of what they're talking about in relation to what that really means in practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be a very fine line, this, isn't it, between someone maybe, let's say, running a charity that offers advice to children about this kind of thing. And it's where you draw that line, isn't it, about what's advice and what's coercion. Now, I think especially when it comes to things like puberty blockers, for example, my understanding is that you have to go through a court if you're under 16 to get those. So that's a process. So obviously you would hope that at the end of the day the right outcome is received. But look, there have been numerous cases. Now, I suspect we're going to have a lot of this going forward, of people who maybe feel like they rushed into it, who maybe feel like they want to detransition, and that can have quite damaging consequences.
It's really interesting that there is a famous transgender man called Buck Angel, and he said that he's much older, and he said that when he was younger, he'd never heard of detransitioning. And now all of a sudden we're hearing about so many people changing their minds. And on top of that, I only left, secondary school, what was it, 8 years ago, and I had never heard anything like this, when I was growing up in secondary school. So it must have been something that has really just exploded in the last 5 years, because I'd never heard of anybody doing anything like this. And this wasn't a bigoted or dinosaur type of school. No. And actually, it just seems that all of these issues are now just being completely filling our education system and our institutions all of a sudden.
Yeah, it does seem to have really stepped up, doesn't it? And I do wonder whether or not it's quite easy to influence children when it comes to this kind of thing. You've got a nice coloured flag, for example, and, it can all look a bit, quite happy, clappy, and this, that, and the other, and it's wrapped up a lot of the time, rightly so, in a sense of tolerance and this, that, and the other, and a sense of these are the values that we have, and as part of that now, you can think this way about this. And personally, I think that's a bit concerning, really.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point that you make. I mean, teenagers, they are going through a difficult time in terms of figuring out their body, they're changing, they're having feelings that perhaps they didn't have, and to have people basically tell them what that means and make that fix to them can be very, very suggestive. And on top of that now, if you say that you're trans or non-binary, people congratulate you as if it's meant to be an achievement of some kind. And I think that can make young people think that it is something inherently good when it's actually quite neutral.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I would also make the suggestion that we see, things like rising cases of violence against women, for example. We see rising cases of things like sexual assaults and this, that and the other. Maybe we could actually spend time educating children about those things. Maybe we could spend time actually trying to get into kids' heads in that way and actually teach them to be, better members of society, as it were, and to stop those things, as opposed to maybe trying to talk about this kind of stuff all the time. And it is that idea for me of I would be absolutely fuming if it was my child, especially if they were very, very young, purely because how do you explain that to them? I want them to think the tooth fairy exists, which of course she does. Anyway, email in gbviews@gbnews.uk. Lots of you have been getting in touch already. People saying that it's a form of coercion. This is from Alison. Thank you very much. And who else have we got? Daniel has said, hopefully this issue is not portrayed as a large-scale problem. I think what we're saying there is the idea that a lot of people are wrestling with transitioning is because actually only about 1% of the population are.
No, but I think even if it's a minority, that's not necessarily an issue because actually this ideology, this way of thinking is becoming something that is affecting all elements of our institutions. Even if it is a tiny proportion of the population, the whole logic of actually transitioning, changing your gender fluidity, you can have 100 genders, is something that seems to be very increasingly mainstream.
Yes, well, indeed. Keep those views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk. But coming up, households could see substantial tax rises by 2027. Find out what this means for you. Stay with us.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point. Morning, everyone. Now, a leading think tank has announced that tax bills for households will be £3,000 higher since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister as a result of changes announced in the budget.
Well, the Resolution Foundation found the calculation of taxes increasing by £3,000 by 2026 to 27 means that the tax will be at the highest since 1950. The think tank also said that the poorest fifth in the country will be around £280 a year worse off as a result of the £20 cut in universal credit.
Indeed. Well, joining us now to discuss this is Joe Ventura from the Taxpayers Alliance. Thank you very much, Joe. So, look, we're all going to be skint, are we?
Oh, well, it certainly looks that way, doesn't it? You know, I think this research tells us a lot about the sort of worrying direction of travel that we're on at the moment. I mean, on Wednesday, I think many people were keen to see what the Chancellor would have to say about the rising cost of living, and we're likely holding out some hope for some meaningful tax cuts, God forbid, that would improve their situations and kickstart growth in the economy. But, I mean, instead, Rishi seemed to list off a load of spending projects with telephone number-sized price tags. And, you know, that's not to say there weren't some things to be positive about. I think the reforms to alcohol duties and business rates are very welcome. But at the end of the day, you know, TPA research has found that the overall tax burden is going to hit its highest sustained level since 1951 next year. So, I mean, ultimately, I think taxpayers are going to be left to pick up a tab for a big spend government, and apparently not even a global pandemic is going to be enough to change their minds at the Treasury.
But Joe, I mean, is it any surprise when we go into a national lockdown where, you know, the NHS and all of these different things have been stretched that we are going to now have to fit the bill for it? I mean, many people were saying this last year that all of the measures that were being taken was going to have a huge price tag at the end of it, and that meant the burden was going to be fit on the taxpayer.
Well, I think you're quite right to sort of raise this attitude of, you know, sort of inevitability. I mean, there is that perception that it's inevitable going around, that there's going to be this high tax environment. But, you know, I think we need to tackle that attitude. You know, the Chancellor is always keen to stress that he's a sort of fiscal conservative with low tax instincts, but then he sort of turns around and says that meaningful tax cuts aren't possible because of the pandemic. But, you know, what groups like the Taxpayers Alliance are saying is, you know, we shouldn't be cutting taxes in spite of the pandemic. We should be cutting taxes because of the pandemic. We should be aiming to leave taxpayers with more money in their pockets, which then they can go on and invest in their local high streets, so that businesses can then afford to take on more staff, you know, and that's how we generate growth in an economy and bounce back strongly and raise that revenue. You know, the government even evidenced this theory themselves with their temporary stamp duty cut. That got the house market booming at the time, but you know, unfortunately, they seem to have forgotten that principle. But I think we would have all been much better off if Rishi had stuck to those low tax instincts.
Go for growth. That's the one, isn't it? Do you think that maybe there'll have to come an opportunity where we have, or indeed should, have a referendum on things like net zero? Because we're going to end up paying through the nose for this relentless push for net zero. Your taxes are going to go up, your bills are going to go up, we're all going to be poorer as a result of it. And I don't really remember getting a vote on that.
Well, I believe, we discussed this the other day when propositions for a meat tax came up. I think what we're seeing is a sort of wide pattern right now of concerns around the net zero agenda that they're going to hurt it's going to hurt particularly the less well off. And I think it's a very good point. Already we've seen the announcements of, the sale of petrol and diesel cars being banned, the gas boiler's been on the way out, and sort of mandatory heat pumps. And I think hard-working households are right to be concerned about these policies and how it's going to impact their personal finances. I mean, as I said at the time, let's not forget that it's all right for the super wealthy who can sort of offload their environmental responsibilities, but at the end of the day, it's working people across this country that are going to face these skyrocketing bills if all of these things come to pass. And it's hard to see how the government can sort of justify this high-spend agenda at this time.
Well, you mentioned just then about how you think it's hard for the government to justify it. Why do you think they're doing it then? I mean, at this time, don't we want people to be spending money? We want them to be, making decisions that revive the economy, but actually increasing the tax burden could be the very thing that slows down our recovery. So what's the government's rationale?
Well, that's absolutely right. And I think a lot of us are questioning what the rationale is at the moment. We know that this is a high-spend government. We knew that before COVID. But, the one line that stuck out to me on Wednesday when Rishi stood up at the dispatch box was that he said the Conservatives are now the real party of public services. Now, I'm not particularly sure that that's something that we should be boasting about at a time when so much waste persists in the public sector. I mean, just last year, in a relatively brief investigation with the Daily Mail, we uncovered £5.6 billion of waste across the entire public sector. And I think there's sort of a worryingly little indication that that waste is going to be tackled. We're going to see government departmental spending increase £150 billion during this parliament as a real terms increase for all departments. I think there seem to be no talk whatsoever about ramping up those efficiencies and seeking out savings for taxpayers across the state.
Isn't the idea of there being waste something that's always said, but actually there's only so much efficiency savings that you can do during the whole austerity years? That was what George Osborne talked about, efficiency savings, and that's what was regarded as huge cuts in oftentimes public services and other things that were essential to a lot of people. So it isn't the idea of efficiency savings often used, but there's often very little amount of money that you can actually get from that.
Well, it may be often talked about, but it seems that there's scant action when it comes to the things that really matter. I mean, a perfect example of this sort of unnecessary spend that I'm talking about is HS2, which continues to plough ahead. I mean, projected costs for that project are soaring towards £150 billion. And, I think we've got to ask, why is the government pressing on with projects like this when we know that they'll do very little to actually level up the country as they propose and will impact the economy at a time when the finances are so dire? I mean, the same can be said about overseas aid too. I mean, the Chancellor floated the idea of us returning to the 0.7% target for gross national income when it comes to overseas aid. At the moment, it's obviously down to 0.5%. But I think setting a target in this way just naturally leads to waste. We know that. We've seen the terrible examples over the years of how this money's wasted. So I think we should be dishing out aid on a needs basis. I think that would make a lot more sense to taxpayers and will cut down on the type of waste that we're talking about.
Joe, thank you very much for your time this morning. Joe Venture there from the Taxpayers Alliance, just talking about the fact that essentially, whether you like it or not, which you obviously don't, household bills are going to go through the roof. Your tax is going up, and it doesn't look like that's going to change anytime soon. I think it's time.
Well, anytime soon it's probably going to get much worse. I mean, the government already said a few weeks ago that in relation to the hike in national insurance, that they couldn't rule out that increasing more. And then, as you rightfully mentioned, all of the income and green taxes. I think tax may well be a very big issue at the next election.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Just going to do one view quickly. GB Views at gbnews.uk. David's been in touch. Please, can you stop winking before you go into each advert break? It looks a bit cheap and unnecessary. Sorry about that. I think we're going to go to the news, are we? Come on. Let's do it. Oh, the weather. Oh, there you go. Keep all your thoughts coming in to us anyway on email gbviews at gbnews.uk. We'll be back with more of today's top stories and plenty of your views after the break.
Hello again, good morning to you. A wet start for many, away from the far southeast and far northwest. Persistent rain, turning more showery this afternoon before brighter skies finally arrive in the west later. This weather front has been stuck across northern England, southern Scotland during the last few days. It's finally making some progress east, but It will send another spell of persistent wet weather into parts of Wales, southwest England, northern England and southern, followed by central Scotland this morning. Showers also pushing into eastern England, but all in all, the weather is starting to dry up, albeit very slowly. So further wet weather on top of what's already fallen, southern and central Scotland, parts of Wales, risk of disruption before finally the rain turns more showery and some brightness into Northern Ireland, southern Wales and the southwest later. Staying mild for the time being, but temperatures are going to start to decline over the next few days. Turning wet then as we end the day across northeast Scotland, some clear spells following the rain, but the next system quite quickly moving in. Showers or heavy rain for Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest during the evening, and then that pushing through Scotland and the rest of England by dawn. In between the rain, some clear spells, some brightness as we start off the weekend in East Anglia in the southeast, followed by that spell of wet weather that comes through late morning. Scotland sees the rain move through central and then finally northern parts before it turns to showers. And by the afternoon, actually, many places brightening up. There will be some spells of sunshine coming through, but also quite frequent and fairly lively showers arriving, particularly into western parts. Temperatures a few degrees down compared to recent days. They're edging back to around average for the time of year. But Sunday looks unsettled with another low moving in, further spells of heavy rain and strong winds with coastal gales. Monday, likewise, further spells of wet and windy weather.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christies.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point. Good morning, everyone. You're watching To The Point here on GB News with me, Patrick Christies, and Inaya Falarin Iman, and we are here all the way through until midday today with a show full of all of the biggest topics and those biggest issues. Here's what's coming up.
Yes, and make sure you get in touch with your views as usual at gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be reading out all of those throughout the show, but first it's time for the news.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. This is your news at 10 o'clock. The UK hasn't ruled out involving the Navy in the ongoing dispute with France over post-Brexit fishing rights. French authorities are yet to release a British scallop vessel detained yesterday for not having a licence, with French prosecutors saying the boat's captain will be called to court next August. France's ambassador to the UK has been summoned to the Foreign Office this morning to answer questions over the escalating threats from Paris. Talking earlier to GB News, the Environment Secretary George Eustace didn't rule out involving Navy vessels if needed.
We want to try to resolve this dispute by getting France to understand and accept that those 55 vessels that haven't been granted a licence, probably aren't entitled to one. And if they're able to offer us the evidence that supports the applications, well, we'd process them. But for now, we're trying to de-escalate this, but we're also very clear that if France carries out the threats that they've made, then we will obviously make a proportionate response.
A serving Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with child sex offences. 51-year-old Detective Constable Francois Zolwage was arrested yesterday at an address in Basingstoke. He's facing 4 charges, including attempting to meet a girl under 16 years of age and engaging in sexual communication with a child. US President Joe Biden will meet Pope Francis at the Vatican today to discuss the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change and poverty. Mr. Biden arrived in Europe, leaving a fraught domestic agenda in limbo back at home. It's after his fellow Democrats abandoned plans to vote for the president's nearly $3 trillion spending plan. After meeting the Pope, President Biden will travel to the G20 Leaders Summit in Rome and COP26 in Glasgow. Insulate Britain activists have staged another protest this morning, gathering on the M25. Essex police say a number of people have blocked the road between junctions 28 and 29. The eco group claim 14 protesters have caused major disruption on the motorway in several locations. It comes after an injunction was put in place by the High Court, banning the group from obstructing traffic. England could soon become the first country in the world to licence e-cigarettes as a medical product to quit smoking. They're a step closer to being prescribed on the NHS for the first time under new plans. It comes after the British health regulator updated its guidance for people who want to quit smoking. They say e-cigarette manufacturers can now submit through the same approvals process as other medicines. MPs are warning the Crossrail project is facing an £150 million funding gap. The Commons Public Accounts Committee expressed doubts over how and when taxpayer loans will be repaid. That's after the collapse in fares revenue due to the coronavirus pandemic. It's predicted the cost of finishing the project is now at £18.9 billion. Coronavirus restrictions in Wales will be strengthened in a bid to curb infections, which are the highest in the UK. First Minister Mark Drakeford will reintroduce some measures, including guidance around self-isolation. Adults and young people aged 5 to 17 will soon be asked to isolate until they receive a negative PCR test. That's if someone in their household has symptoms or tests positive. COVID passes will also be extended to theatres, cinemas and concert halls. Facebook has officially rebranded itself as a wider company called Meta. It's designed to represent the social media network's expanding business plan into what they're calling the metaverse. That's an online world where people can meet, play and work virtually. The core Facebook service will still remain unchanged. And archaeologists have discovered Roman artefacts during HS2 works in Stoke Mandeville. They made a once-in-a-lifetime discovery of statues and other pieces at St Mary's Church. Dr. Rachel Wood, the lead archaeologist on the site, called the findings significant.
Really rare finds in the UK. To find one stone head or one set of shoulders would be really, really astonishing, but we have 2 complete heads and shoulders as well as a third head as well. And they're even more significant to us archaeologically because they've actually helped change our understanding of the site here before the medieval church was built.
You're right up to date. I'll have the latest headlines for you in half an hour. Now it's back to Patrick and Anaya with To The Point.
Good morning, everybody. You're watching To The Point here on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Inaya Folarin Iman, and we've got 2 hours full of all the biggest topics, all the best guests as well, and everything to get you talking. So here's what's coming up.
Yes, well, the French ambassador to the UK has been summoned by Foreign Secretary Liz Truss as the row over post-Brexit fishing rights escalates. We'll be talking to former MEP Anne Widdecombe.
Yes, can't wait for that one. Western museums are under pressure to return artefacts belonging to a number of African countries. We'll be live in Lagos, Nigeria with the latest.
Yes, and as the COP26 climate conference gets underway in Glasgow this weekend, in our head-to-head feature, we'll be asking, will it actually make a difference?
Well, we have all that coming your way and much, much more across the programme as well. You can get in touch with your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and indeed, absolutely loads of you already have done. We'll be going to some of those right now, I think, are we? Yes, OK, all right then. Well, we're going to be talking, a lot of you getting in touch about Insulate Britain. I'm very angry listening to all these people telling me that the world is going to be destroyed in a few years' time. The planet will be here for millions of years until the sun implodes. That's from Ken. Thank you very much,
Ken. Had a lot
of
views about your winking, Patrick.
We have had a lot of views about my winking. I think it's fair to say it's a divisive issue. And whether or not I should continue to wink remains a matter of great debate in our inbox. So thank you very much, everybody. I actually don't realise I do it, but...
I've not noticed it.
No.
Maybe it's a twitch.
Maybe I've just got something in my eye. I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. But
well,
yes.
A lot of people mentioning the amount of people flying into the COP26 conference whilst arguing that everyone else should reduce their flying.
Good classic, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think, you know, Prince Harry's about that.
That is a real worry. I mean, this idea that, you know, frequent flyers, a great opportunity that we've only for the last 100 years really been allowed to do, is now going to be prevented. Something that is a great thing for human beings to be able to travel the world, see all of the different things that the world has to offer. We're now going to be fined and penalised potentially for that.
I'd have to get very good at swimming, I think, by the sounds of things.
Yeah, it would be like Greta Thunberg, get a boat. All the way to America.
Get a multi-million-pound boat to America. But anyway, there we go. Well, yes, we're going to, very shortly, we're going to be having a big head-to-head debate about this very issue, about COP26, about whether or not it's going to make any difference whatsoever. I did read yesterday, I think it was, the day before, that apparently they've cancelled some GP appointments, classic, because they want to close a load of the roads for COP26, and it just seemed a bit self-defeating, that, for me. The idea that we're having a conference about something that's supposed to protect lives whilst also at the same time potentially ruining some.
My thing in all of this is the democratic deficit that I feel that seems to be at the heart of it. You know, all of these decisions being made, potentially transforming the way that we might live, but actually has this really been put to a vote? If people vote for it, if people understand the implications and support it, then, you know, I completely hold my hands up and that's fine. But there is this sense that there is a big democratic deficit in the road that we're going down that could potentially have a huge impact on democracy, the economy and our everyday lives.
Yes, and I think as well, when people start getting hit in the pocket by this, and I think that's really when they're going to really, you know, have some views in it. I said it before, I'll say it again. I do wonder whether or not we should have a referendum on net zero. You know, whether or not we should actually be asked the question, right? This is probably how much it's going to actually cost you. This is about how much it's going to hit you in the pocket. Do you want it or do you not? And just see what the public think.
Yeah, and I'm actually a big Green supporter, contrary to what some might think. And I just think that, you know, if you are somebody, you know, do you want us to do something to support the environment or to tackle climate change? I think the overwhelming majority will say yes, but then when you get into the specifics of what that will look like and what that will mean for their pay packet, then I think the thing gets much more obscure. And I think too often environmentalists go, well, look, the polls say that this is a big issue for the public, but it's not clear in those polls what the public are actually supporting in terms of their everyday life change.
And again, loads of you as well getting in touch about the trans issue that I raised at the start of the show, about whether or not it would become illegal in order to essentially try to convince a child to change their gender. Lots of you talking about that. You're absolutely right about teachers shaping young children's minds. One of my granddaughter's teachers is very free with her opinions about trans people, but always remembers to say, in my opinion. So that's from Kathy.
I don't think they should be talking about transgender. You know, I just don't see why it would come up in education. I mean, I don't really know in what circumstances kids should be talking about gender. I mean, unless you're talking about biology and you're talking about the anatomy. But as I mentioned in my schooling, gender just didn't come up.
No, right, so we're going to move on now and we're going to have a discussion about COP26 just before we throw over to one of our esteemed guests on this particular issue. It really has kicked off about my winking, and quite a lot of you do really think I am a bit of a winker, so there we go. Anyway, we're going to go over now to the one and only Lembit Opik, who joins us right here in the studio, and as the clock ticks down to the start of COP26, the challenges facing efforts to deliver action to basically avert dangerous climate change are apparently coming into sharp focus. The summit is taking place in Glasgow from Sunday and has no global treaty to agree, unlike other major UN climate conferences in Paris, for example, in 2015.
Indeed, but it is being described as a conference that must deliver on the Paris Agreement and its clear pledge to limit global warming to below 2 Celsius or 1.5 Celsius to avoid the worst impacts of global warming.
Right, so today we're asking, will COP26 actually make a difference? And joining us now is, of course, former Liberal Democrat MP, Lembit Opik. Thank you very much for coming to the studio as well and being a part of it. So, will COP26 make a difference?
No, well, not a good one. You've just mentioned the 2 Celsius or 1.5 Celsius limit. It's a guess. My fundamental point, and I've been unwillingly really dragged into this debate, is there is no climate emergency. It wouldn't matter if it didn't have an impact, but it's affecting our choice in personal transport. You might know that electric cars and electric motorbikes are meant to replace petrol and diesel cars and motorbikes by 2030, 2035 at the latest. So it's making a practical difference. Here's the fundamental problem. When you talk to the environmentalists, they don't actually understand the science. CO2, I don't think, is driving our climate the way that it's been described. There are very important factors, the way the Earth goes around the sun, it changes, the way the sun behaves changes. These people don't seem to understand any of that. So you've got 25,000 people flying to Glasgow, which, as you suggested, is a bit ironic when they're passing resolutions telling us not to fly. Why aren't they using Zoom? But, OK, we'll leave that. 25,000 people to try to stop a trace gas called CO2, which doesn't, in my view, affect the climate like this. And we could go back to ice ages and the science, but they don't really seem to care about this. This is political virtue signalling.
No, but you said in your view, but actually isn't this not about what people think? It's about what they would argue is fact. I mean, we've got a whole conference, international partners and leaders meeting across the globe. You know, we have documentary after documentary. There is a scientific consensus that this is happening, and the global leaders have agreed that something needs to be done. Are you just saying that this isn't happening and we shouldn't care about it?
Climate change is happening. It's always happened. My argument is human beings aren't making a catastrophic impact on that. So it's the right question, but we're giving it the wrong answer. And also, science is not consensus. You were talking about having a referendum or something like that. The reality is most people have never heard of something called the Younger Dryas event. That was an ice age. But you've got to understand that before you understand what is going on.
But the environmentalists, to play devil's advocate, they would say that, you know, even if, for example, the climate might not be caused by changing by human behaviour, they would argue that regardless if it's warming, that will set off a series of feedback loops that would have a huge impact on society. You know, rising sea levels, melting ice caps, all of these types of things could have a really huge impact.
That's a valid concern, but then you have to really get to the science. Perhaps ironically and counterintuitively, these changes could actually prompt an ice age, because we are actually living in an ice age at the moment. For most of the history of the Earth, there hasn't been any ice on the polar caps. So it's all a little bit futile, if I'm right, and the human influence isn't that big. But the practical effect is you can't buy a petrol motorbike, you can't buy a petrol or diesel car after 2030.
But what about the precautionary principle? The idea that, you know, even if there is some suggestion that something could go wrong, and there may not be full evidence for it, but there is some suggestion that the onus is on us to make sure that we don't actually allow that to happen. And so we are taking precautionary measures in order to prevent the possibility that those things could be true.
Now, once again, a fair point, but it doesn't come without cost. Electric vehicles are more expensive than petrol, diesel. They don't last so long. Having to change a gas boiler for some much more exotic way of heating your house, which doesn't even work so well, all of those have got problems. We haven't even got a national grid which is green. So if it was just placard-waving people who are concerned and making a difference at the margin, I'd go with that. But the precautionary principle actually carries with it so much cost, so much damage. And fundamentally, what I really want to do is sit in this studio with any green, any environmentalist and share my data with their data. They can explain why the climate's changed loads in the past, even when human beings have been on the planet. But before the Industrial Revolution, when we weren't making CO2, they'd never have an answer to that question.
But why is there a push for this? Why is there the acceptance of only one version of science, do you think?
And that's something that concerns me as well, because I actually think science has been subsumed. We're almost at the end of reason instead of the age of reason, to sound a little bit like Bridget Jones, but...
it works.
I suppose it does. But the science is fake science. Why are we in this situation? My suspicion is because three things have come together. Vested interest, because tons of money to be made with this environmental agenda. Secondly, there are some political motivations. I think there are people who are anti-establishment. They're now in the ascendancy because they've convinced Politicians, and here's the third point, virtue signalling. Those three things have conspired. I find myself more and more drawn into this because I'm concerned about the impact on our lives, on your life, on my life, on especially the least wealthy people's lives. You mentioned the privilege of flying. That's really only been with us for about 30, 40 years.
Yeah, but I mean, what about your own, the leader of the party that you were part of? I mean, they have completely embraced the green agenda. I mean, what kind of response are you getting? You seem to be now becoming increasingly in opposition to the party that you were an MP for.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm in the party or not, but if anyone's watching, you can tell me. That would be helpful. I find myself feeling this slight discomfort sitting here, trying to be logical, trying to be rational, inviting the Green movement to share their data, to put their information on the table. Same goes for the Lib Dems. In fact, I'm extremely disappointed that the Liberal Democrats, and actually that the Conservatives, have just embraced, without thinking, this non-scientific agenda.
But isn't it, let's even say it's not scientific, there isn't a consensus, but isn't green technology a great thing to be investing in technology that isn't, that is clean, that actually is renewable? Isn't that an innate good?
Yes, absolutely. I hope the human race will be around for thousands or tens of thousands of years. We shouldn't be squandering precious resources like oil. Let's make it last as long as we can. But that doesn't mean blasting our Western way of life at the cost of, as I say, generally the least wealthy. So, yeah, let's be frugal, but let's be rational. And let's have nuclear, which many of the Greens do oppose as well. But let's be careful about what we're doing. And we can't really stop climate change. People accuse me of being a climate change denier. No, I'm the one who insists it's always happened. The climate change deniers are the Greens who think we can stop, we can freeze our climate the way it is now. That's never happened before. It's not going to happen.
Should we have a referendum on net zero because the impact financially that's going to have on all of us?
I would agree with that if there was also a condition that the media has to be neutral. To GBNews is great credit. You give both sides the opportunity. I've seen other people here...
It's worthwhile just saying, sorry, quickly, sorry to interrupt. It's worthwhile saying at this point that we actually did... This was a head-to-head, and unfortunately there were technical issues at the gentleman's end there. So, yeah, but we do try to give both sides a good go.
I've seen Donoghue McCarthy, who I know very well.
Yes.
He's come here, he's taken a different view to me. If it was a truly balanced debate like GBNews trying to do, then that's fine. But that means the other media have to give both sides statutory balance. But that's sadly gone. The BBC say you don't have to have balance in the debate. As a result, you're expecting the public to understand the deep science here when the Greens themselves don't understand the science, or they won't share it. So yes to the referendum if that's it's a fair vote, yeah. But actually what I think we really have to do is take our politicians, put them to account, get the political parties to explain why they believe what I think is fake science. If they can prove me wrong, I'll change my view. So far, no one has. I wrote my first article on this in 1980 when I was 15.
Wow.
In the intervening, for the 41 years, I haven't seen much to change my view that the big problem is next glaciation, not the overheating of the world. Anyone can come disprove it here on GB News. I'll sit here, I'll admit if I'm wrong. So far, no one's done that.
Well, there you go. The gauntlet has been well and truly laid down. Lembit, thank you very much. Fantastic to have you in the studio. Lembit Opit there, former Liberal Democrat MP and potentially still a member of the party as well. Someone might want to reach out and let him know, apparently. But there we are. Well, thank you, everyone who's been getting in touch. Loads of you have been lighting up my inbox just based on this very issue. Lembit speaks a lot of sense and should be listened to. Apparently, that's from John, so you've got at least one fan there. But look, after the break, we will get the latest on the ongoing cod wars with France. War with France. And what could happen for both our fish and fishermen. Stay with us.
Hello again. It's been a wet start to the day for many of us, but the main bands of rain through the afternoon will be moving away, replaced by a mix of sunshine and showers, and it will feel less mild today and more especially through the weekend. This weather front was stuck across northern England and southern Scotland during this week, and it brought an awful lot of rainfall with it. It's still causing issues with further spells of rain moving through Wales, northern England, as well as much of Scotland through the afternoon. In some places, another 20 to 30 millimetres, and of course that falling onto saturated ground could cause some issues. But it's replaced by sunshine and showers, blustery winds pushing those showers into Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, and cooler air follows as well, with temperatures a couple of degrees down compared to recent days, but still above average for the time of year. The wet weather continues there for eastern and northern Scotland for a time into the evening. Clear spells then follow, but another system pushes in, a very lively system overnight actually, across most parts. Very gusty winds, heavy rainfall, Could be quite noisy as that arrives. Ahead of that, it's going to be clear across eastern England, and behind it, temperatures dipping to -1 for some sheltered parts of northern and northwest Scotland. Nevertheless, this heavy rain is with us first thing on Saturday. It's moving into eastern England, eastern Scotland as well. It clears to sunny spells and showers for Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest. Some of these showers again on the lively side with gusty winds. But once it pulls away, some decent sunny spells breaking out across the Midlands, eastern England as well. And a cooler day for all, with temperatures back to around average for the time of year. So we say goodbye to that system on Saturday night. Clear spells briefly before the next weather system moves in, a series of weather fronts and wrapped around a developing area of low pressure to bring yet more wind and rain during Saturday. Much of that clearing through during the morning, replaced again by sunny spells and showers. It remains changeable on Monday.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point. Yes, good morning, everybody. Right, now, this is an absolutely massive situation that's going on at the moment. France's ambassador to the UK has been summoned to the Foreign Office as the row over post-Brexit fishing rights dramatically escalated. So Foreign Secretary Liz Truss took the rare step of ordering an allied nations envoy to be summoned in a sign of the UK's concern about the row, which has already seen one UK trawler detained in a French port.
Well, French ministers have warned they will block British boats from some French ports and tighten checks on vessels travelling between France and the UK if the issue is not resolved by Tuesday, as well as threatening the electricity supply to the Channel Islands.
Which is, of course, what friendly nations do. So, has France overstepped the mark? Well, to help us answer that, we are joined by former MEP and, indeed, I think it's fair to say, national treasure, Anne Widdecombe. Thank you very much. Good to see you, Anne. So...
Good to see you.
So, what should we do about this then? Come on, let's get our heads together and just fix this problem, because we've summoned over the French ambassador. What do we need to say to him? Or her?
Well, whatever we say to the French ambassador, I think it's a her, whatever we say to the French ambassador isn't going to make any difference. The French are going to go on behaving unreasonably because Macron is coming up to a general election in which he's looking pretty vulnerable. And the fact is, if anybody's got a beef about fishing post-Brexit, it should be the British fishermen. They were told throughout the Brexit campaign, if we have Brexit, we're going to control our own waters, we're going to expand opportunities. And in fact, we ended up pretty well with the status quo. 98% of visas already held by the French were simply re-granted. It's the Brits who've got a problem. But what's happening now is that the French have relied upon a pure technicality. The ship that they've impounded has actually got a license. That appears to be common ground. The issue is whether or not the British slipped up when they notified the license, but it's got a license, and therefore it should be left alone. This is Macron posturing. The French hate us, they always have. Macron hates Brexit, and this is all part of that. Now, we should simply, you asked me a straight question. You said, what should we tell the French ambassador? I would say very bluntly, first of all, release that ship because you have no right to be holding it under international law. But secondly, if you go on acting like this, then it is going to simply be a question that we are going to take sanctions in retaliation. That will mean a trade war. Neither of us wants that because it is in nobody's interest.
Oh.
At all.
Oh, she's back. You're back. Sorry, Anne, we lost you for a second there, but I think we were talking about the fact that... Yeah, I've got you. Yes, you're there. So yes, no. Look, when it comes to France, they've done things like try to siphon off some of our PPE that was destined for our care homes, our NHS, our education system. There's, quite serious allegations about 5 million vaccines going walkies, aren't there? I mean, actually, are the French our friends?
No, the French are not our friends. They've always held a grudge against us. I don't mean Mr. and Mrs. Ordinary Frenchmen. I don't think it applies there. But certainly French politicians have never been our friends. De Gaulle absolutely hated us, didn't want us to join the European Union. I only wish he'd prevailed. But the history is very long. We shelled their fleet immediately before the Second World War because we didn't want it impounded by the Nazis. There was an argument over whether we deserted them in favour of our own troops at Dunkirk. We didn't give them a seat at the Yalta Conference, and so it goes on and on and on, right back through history. And there is undeniable tension, and the fishing war is simply a symbol of that. It's not the cause of it, it's a symbol of the tension that already exists. What I was saying before you lost me was that I think we should simply say to the French ambassador that if they don't start behaving reasonably, we will start imposing sanctions. That could lead to a trade war, and that is in nobody's interest, not in France's interest and not in Britain's interest, not in the EU's interest.
And you mentioned that the French have not liked us for a very long time, but doesn't Britain play that game as well? Don't we do the posturing and, standing up to France for our own kind of population's enjoyment too? So do we play that game too on this side?
Can you give me an example?
Well, I mean, for example...
I think she's talking about me, Anne.
Talking about?
Me. I do it. But I do...
You do it.
I do.
With due respect, Patrick, I don't think you're Britain. I think you speak for a large chunk of Britain, but I don't think you can say you're not a British politician, you're not part of the British government yet. I wish you were, but you're not. And I'm just asking for an example of where the British government has postured against France. I don't think we have. Or I don't think they have.
OK, all right. So do you suspect that this might rumble on? One of my concerns with it now is that the French have gone so far with it that they would have to have now an embarrassing climb down if they wanted to reverse things. And I just wonder whether or not they actually feel as though they can't back down now.
I'm sure that's part and parcel of it. There's an election coming up. That is just the sort of situation which you don't want an embarrassing climb down. I'm sure we would make it as easy as possible for them. I don't think we have any interest in escalating the tensions here at all. I'm sure we will make it as easy as possible for them. So let's hear the ambassador's proposals.
OK, all right, and thank you very much for your time, MEP, former MEP there, Anne Widdecombe, discussing the fishing wars and the ongoing row that is. We have now politely invited the French ambassador to the United Kingdom to come and have a little word with us about what's going on.
Well, indeed. And coming up, we'll be discussing the government's proposals to create a new criminal offence for so-called conversion therapies. But before that, a look at the morning's news.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. Here are the latest headlines. The Environment Secretary, George Eustace, has not ruled out military involvement in the ongoing dispute with France over post-Brexit fishing rights if diplomacy fails. The French authorities are yet to release a British scallop vessel detained yesterday for not having a licence. French prosecutors say the boat's captain will be called to court next August. A serving Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with child sex offences. 51-year-old Detective Constable Francoise Olwich was arrested yesterday at an address in Basingstoke. He's facing 4 charges, including attempting to meet a girl under 16 years of age. The US President will meet Pope Francis at the Vatican today to discuss the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change and poverty. Joe Biden arrived in Rome, where he'll also travel to the G20 Leaders Summit, followed by a trip to Glasgow for COP26. Insulate Britain activists have staged another protest this morning, gathering on the M25. Essex police say a number of people have blocked the road between junctions 28 and 29. The eco group claim 14 protesters have caused major disruption on the motorway in several locations. It comes after an injunction was put in place by the High Court banning the group from obstructing traffic. And England could soon become the first country in the world to licence e-cigarettes as a medical product to quit smoking. They're a step closer to being prescribed on the NHS for the first time under new plans. It comes after the British health regulator updated its guidance for people who want to quit smoking. They say e-cigarette manufacturers can now submit through the same approvals process as other medicines. I'll have more on today's main stories for you at the top of the hour. Now here's the break.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christies.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point. Good morning, everybody. Now, it's time for our feature, The Controversy. And the government's proposing to create a new criminal offence for so-called talking conversion therapies as part of a raft of measures to ban the coercive practice within months.
Well, proposals will protect LGBT people in England and Wales, including children, and to ensure individuals found guilty of conversion therapy offences cannot profit from the practice. But critics said that the plan should have gone further and outlawed all conversion therapy altogether.
Well, joining us now to discuss this further is Peter Linus, the UK director of the Evangelical Alliance, who earlier this year wrote to the Prime Minister warning a widespread ban on gay conversion therapy could end up criminalising church leaders. Thank you very much for joining us. So, Why are you so passionate about the idea of conversion therapy? I mean, isn't it a bit coercive? Isn't it a bit backwards?
Well, look, we welcome the consultation that comes out, and it appears the government is going to honour the 2 commitments that were made actually in the letter from the Prime Minister that you just referenced. And the first of those is to ban coercive and abusive practices, and we absolutely support that. But the Prime Minister also said they would continue to allow and safeguard spiritual support. So the basics of that is people should be free to choose the support that they want. And we had campaigners, and in fact one of them I think was on your show earlier, who are very clear that things like prayer and pastoral care should be banned, everyday Christian practices. And what we want to ensure is that the ban doesn't do that. These are fundamental human rights, and it's absolutely right that the government is saying it's going to protect those, while at the same time banning those abusive practices, and rightly so.
Why are you worried that this may impede on what church leaders do? What is it that some church leaders might do for people that might be concerned or feeling uncomfortable in their sexuality?
So the campaigners, we've always said, look, the physical acts of violence are absolutely wrong and those are already banned, but even then campaigners weren't sure. So the consultation has confirmed those are banned. So now we're talking, the phrase the consultation uses is talking conversion therapies. And the difficulty is that's not well defined. So we believe you should be able to consent and make a choice to come and have the kind of treatment you want. So if you want somebody to pray with you, to live a life of celibacy or to respond in that way, you should be absolutely free to do that. Other campaigners like Jane Ozanne and others are saying, no, that should all be banned. You shouldn't have any choice. You shouldn't be able to consent to anything. We think freedom of choice, freedom of religion, and freedom to consent to the kind of therapy or the kind of counselling or kind of support you want is incredibly important. And the government has rightly recognised that. Ban the harmful practices, allow freedom of choice.
Oh, is he there?
So from our point of view, that seems really clear, and I think that's where the government's trying to head in this consultation. We'll be encouraging our members to respond. The danger is by not giving us good definitions, good clarity, all sorts of conversations could get caught up in that. And this isn't just around sexual orientation, it's also around gender identity. And so the real concern is parents talking with their children, and ministers talking in their congregation.
No, I just want to know genuinely, and I'm not going to have a massive pop at you one way or the other on this. I just want to know: do you think it's wrong to be gay?
No, it's not wrong to be gay, but there are people who say I'm gay and I would like to live in a certain way in response to that, and so they're saying, can I go and get support for that from a church? And we're saying, yes, you can. Is it okay for a church to teach its beliefs? Yes, we should be able to. And can people respond accordingly? And that's what we're saying. We need that freedom. Campaigners are trying to restrain and restrict that freedom, and I think that's really unhealthy in a democratic society.
So when it comes, there's one issue in terms of people that might be concerned about their sexuality. You mentioned celibacy. Is this something that you see heterosexual people looking for in the church as well? If they're concerned about, promiscuity in their own lifestyle, that they might go to the church in order to get some moral guidance in relation to that as well? Are you saying that there's a range of different things that the church might actually offer for people in relation to questions of sex and relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. The church does want to talk about those issues. Those are really important issues. It's not all that defines us, but the reality is we are human beings, but that part of that is that we're sexual beings, so people want to have sexual relationships. And the church has said, hey, look, marriage is a fantastic place in which to have that. Are we okay to talk to young people and say that we think is the best place in which to have a sexual relationship? We want to make sure we have the freedom to keep talking about that. And people who are heterosexual or homosexual may, for various reasons, want to live a celibate lifestyle. And that's a challenge, and they would want support to do that. People praying for them, people gathering around them. As long as they choose that, we'd want to say you need to be able to have the support for that. Other campaigners are saying, no, let's ban that. Let's not allow that. And we're saying that's unhealthy. So I think the government has struck a good balance here as well enough. All sorts of conversations, talking therapies could get caught up in this, and they need to do a tight job on the definitions.
Yeah, I guess what campaigners would argue is that, for example, they are still worried about the coercive element. And you're mentioning, yes, you agree that no one should be coerced into it. But you find, young people from their parents, from different religious communities, essentially putting a lot of pressure on them, which isn't explicitly saying you must do that. But you may then, will disown you or will no longer support you unless you go down this road. And that can be incredibly traumatic and difficult and isolating for so many of those young people. And so the campaigners would say, no, ban it outright to prevent anything like that happening in the future.
And so I think we do need to look at things like best practice and good guidelines as to how that's done to make sure this is done well. And listen, the church has not always done a good job on that. It's one of the things we want to say and be clear about. We haven't always got this right, nor is the medical practice more generally. And so a lot of these treatments were done under the NHS and under the health service previously. We've changed some of our attitudes. We've got some stuff wrong. We need to acknowledge that. But as a consequence, what I think would be really unhealthy to do is to ban that. What that actually says is that gay people can't make their own choice. So if somebody's same-sex attracted said, I would like this therapy, I'd like pastoral support around this, and what some campaigners are saying is, no, you're not entitled to make that choice. It actually discriminates, ironically, against those who are same-sex attracted. And again, we don't think that's a healthy place to go. The government appears to be recognising that, but I don't think there's anywhere near enough protection yet in this consultation.
And very quickly, one thing that has been arising recently is this conversation around gender, trans and detransitioning. And I've heard some LGBT campaigners saying that actually encouraging a kid to change their gender is actually a form of conversion therapy, because you have maybe young kids that may end up being lesbian or being gay actually being told, no, you're literally a boy or you're literally a girl because they're attracted to people of the same sex. I mean, do you recognise that concern at all, that is a new form of conversion therapy and pressurising kids to change their gender?
I do think that's one of the complexities of this consultation, is it's put together sexual orientation and gender identity. So when it comes to sexual orientation, conversion therapy means what they're trying to ban is anybody who helps to try and somebody to change their sexual orientation. They're saying that's not possible, you can't do that. But when it comes to gender identity, the thing they're trying to ban is if you stop change, if you say, let's wait, especially to a child or a young person. And the Keira Bell case that's recently gone through the courts has shown some of the issues of that. Keira Bell herself has told her story of detransitioning. She thinks she was pushed into that too early, onto puberty blockers and then onto cross-sex hormones. And she has deep regret and is not the only person. So this is an incredibly complex area where, ironically, conversion therapy there is pushing somebody through to change is considered now the good way to go, rather than saying, why don't you wait? Why don't you take the time to go through? So again, that's part of the complexity of what the government's proposing, and they've mixed two ideas at opposite purposes here.
Peter, thank you very much. It was interesting stuff. Whether or not people at home agree or disagree, I think it's good to have the conversation, though, isn't it? Peter Linus there, the UK Director of Evangelical Alliance. What do you think about that? GBViews at gbnews.uk. I just instinctively feel very uncomfortable about the notion of conversion therapy, I think. It does seem to me a little bit like it's, by definition, saying that being gay is wrong. But I suppose what he was making the point there is if the individual wants that of their own free will, then I suppose they should be allowed to do it.
Well, I think it is a really difficult one because of some of the complexities that were just mentioned in relation to, well, is encouraging somebody to change their gender the same thing, or as encouraging someone to change their sexuality, or is stopping someone or saying, no, you shouldn't change your gender if that's the road that they're going down, also a form of conversion therapy. So I think there does seem to be a lot of complexities there, the difference between coercion and advice, that I think the government needs to make sure they're teasing out so they don't catch people that just want to give people prayer and support and guidance at a difficult, challenging time in their life.
Yes, all right. Well, lots of views coming in, particularly about this particular one. Are the government really trying to tell us what to pray for, from Janice? That's interesting stuff, I suppose, actually. Also, a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, actually one person, saying, I agree with Anne Widdecombe and I think Patrick needs to be in British politics. And what's this one now? Yes, you should have a huge chunk of the British public believe that we should essentially be tougher on France. Thank you very much, Kathleen. I didn't have to pay her for that either. Well, moving away. Cambridge University College and a Paris museum have handed back cultural artefacts looted from West Africa during the colonial era, setting a precedent that will pressure other Western institutions to return similarly stolen works.
Yes, well, Jesus College, Cambridge returned a sculpture of a cockerel taken by British troops in 1897, one of hundreds of bronzes pillaged from the once powerful kingdom of Benin, located in what is now known as Nigeria.
Well, Germany has apparently agreed to start returning Benin bronzes held in its museums next year. The University of Aberdeen said it would return a Benin bronze that depicts the head of a king, and the British Museum has spoken about opportunities for sharing and displaying items from its collection in Nigeria, but has never said that it would transfer ownership.
Well, the Nigerian government thanked Jesus College for being a trailblazer and said it looked forward to the return of the artefacts by other institutions. And now joining us live from Nigeria is the international news anchor Suleiman Alade. Thank you, Suleiman, for joining us. I mean, obviously, the Nigerian government has welcomed this, but some of the critics of this move might say that actually if it's in the UK, if it's in British museums, if it's in British institutions, then it's going to be seen by thousands, if not millions of more people. What do you think about that argument?
First, I must commend GBNews for actually putting that correctly by using the right word, looted. If that is correct, which is what it is, then you can then be talking about something that was stolen. So if you did steal something from someone, forcefully taking something from someone, then ultimately the right thing for you to do just to correct history and assuage pains of a people is to return them and ultimately also even apologize. Keep in mind, when this happened in 1897, over a century ago, it occurred when the Beninese, back then in southern Nigeria, were celebrating a festival called Igwe Festival. I'll tell you a little bit quickly here about that festival. It's a festival of pacification for the people, a kind of festival whereby the king, called the Oba, is not allowed to receive visitors, that is non-natives. So when the British came at that point in time, he had sent emissaries saying, wait a minute, allow us finish this festival, then you can then come. But they came on and they took these things. That is why some people in Nigeria, across Africa, they still think that, it was a robbery, that was done, with arms.
But
and
Solomon,
these were actually, forcefully taken.
Yeah, the argument.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
No, well, the argument, you mentioned some of the history of that particular artifact being stolen. But for example, if it was in a museum or if it was in Jesus College, and actually that information potentially could be on a placard educating thousands and thousands of people, actually by returning it, now loads of people aren't going to see it and potentially loads of people aren't going to know that story and that history.
Again, let's bring this analogy for the fact that I have a book, sitting pretty in my shelf, and I refuse to read the book, and you came and stole it. It's still a case of a theft. So it doesn't really matter if someone kept it this number of years and has. So what makes people think that these people couldn't have been able to keep it for this long? Another aspect we're missing out here is that these are just not artifacts. These, for many people, are their gods, their deities. You can actually separate a lot of people from Africa from these so-called artifacts. For an average, African or Nigerian and the Beninese, they still see these artifacts as their, guardian angels, their personal gods. So they've been taken. So it's a potpourri of issues we bring it up here. For people whose history and culture was truncated and also the land desecrated, they still believe that now that Nigeria and the UK have both had this long, robust friendship over the years, it's high time these are returned. And perhaps they should also be having another conversation to see that if there are anyone that will be staying back in the museum, see how they can have maybe a mutual understanding how those things can be left there. Basically, the take here is that not all artifacts are actually artifacts.
Yeah.
Some are the people's gods.
Okay, look, hey, it's an interesting point, absolutely. I mean, this is a debate that's going to rumble on in this country, frankly, because of how much stuff we've nicked over the years. But some people would say we shouldn't be giving things back. Some people say we should. It's nice to have your views. Suleiman Alade there, who is an international news anchor, discussing this potential return of stuff. I mean, Look, I mean, obviously, I was hard to go word and edgeways with that guy, to be fair, but I must say, I don't really like the idea of giving stuff back.
Well, you know, I'm
SARS now.
My family are actually Nigerian. I'm of Nigerian heritage, and I think, you know, now British museums, British institutions are global attractors for so many different things across the world. If anything, they've become institutions for humanity. They're free for people from around the world to go to and to see it and preserve in a way that's very beautiful. And I think that it's great that there is so many different things, regardless of their history, that we can now go see to understand the history and legacy of the entire world.
Yeah, it does make a good point, though, I think, about the fact that for some of these artefacts, for some people, are essentially they're like their gods.
Yeah, but I really doubt it's going to go back to, you know...
Well, it can't, because it's not the same country anymore, is it?
Well, exactly. And so, you know, Nigeria is overwhelmingly Muslim or Christian. It's a tiny proportion of people that still hold those particular artefacts as having some profound religious meaning. And so I think that, and it's unlikely going to go to those people anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, thank you very much, everyone who's been getting in touch about these artefacts. No, they weren't looted, they were looked after. That's from Janice. Thank you very much. Think of all the wars that various countries have gone through, and at the time they weren't bothered about these, and they've been destroyed. Yes, OK, I understand what you're saying. And I do wonder where this ends, really, because, like, you know, if you go back through history, I mean, things move around, don't they? You know, people own bits of land at one point and then not again.
And I do worry about the precedent, you know, it is setting that, you know, he's saying that actually not only should we give it back, we should apologise. I mean, we can't apologise for the past. It's just, we have to learn from the past, recognise that it's full of good and evil, and actually understand it in order to make sense of the future.
Ben's been in touch. Interesting take, this, Ben. We should give the artefacts back that we looted from other countries. However, we should never apologise. That's Ben's view there. What do you think? GB Views at gbnews.uk.
Yeah, well, keep those views coming. Well,
Britain is bracing itself for a season of low temperatures but high heating costs. So while millions of us turn on the radiators when we get cold, there's an entire community of people living in Nottinghamshire that doesn't have that option.
Yes, well, Hockerton Housing Project build their homes without any internal heating system at all. As world leaders come to Britain for the COP26 climate convention, the project says solving the crisis means rethinking the way that we build our homes. Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis has more.
Nestled away in Nottinghamshire's countryside, the Hockerton Housing Project is creating a new kind of human habitat. The homes are covered in earth and built without a single radiator inside, but they're incredibly warm, even in the depths of winter.
We're standing on the roof of Hockerton Housing Project. So these houses keep warm without any space heating, so we don't burn gas or oil. We use passive gains, and by that I mean things like the sunshine and actually body heat. Normally body heat isn't sufficient to keep your house warm, but these houses are so well insulated it is. And with those gains coming in, those heat supplies coming into the house, we're able to keep the house at a comfortable temperature without having to worry about heating bills. So it's kind of good for the environment and it's good for your pocket by thinking about how we manage those energy flows.
The average British home loses around a quarter of its heat because of bad insulation. Most of it goes through the roof. Here, lots of insulation holds warmth from the sun and people's body heat inside of the home.
I'm sure people are sceptical. They often are amazed when they come here, when you walk into a warm house in the middle of winter. And fundamentally, that's because we just don't insulate our houses well enough generally. So people just aren't used to the idea of having a warm house. But I'll put it like this, it's, you know, when the weather's cold, you put a nice warm coat on and you're warm. And if you walked around with a t-shirt and shorts, you're going to get cold in the winter. And that's basically what happens. We've just got to insulate the houses and then they work properly.
In the mid-90s, Simon and a group of environmentally friendly families chose Hockerton in Nottinghamshire as the place to build their utopia. They grow their own food and source energy from the warm or windy weather. It's all in aid of living a sustainable life. It isn't some backward, barefoot society. Home comforts are common. Most of the people living here work two jobs, one as part of the company which runs the community, and the other a normal profession. It is, however, about considering the planet in those everyday choices.
everybody has choices to make. And, you know, yeah, we only have 5 houses here, right here. So, of course, that's not a choice to be able to come into here. But I think there are many little choices that if people even make a choice about, you know, am I going to buy that smoothie or am I going to, you know, buy some locally grown fruit and make something myself at home? You know, these are very simple questions that people are faced with every single day and could make these choices.
We have a warm house, we have a fridge, we have a cooker, all the things you'd normally expect to find in a house. But we try and recycle, we try and look after the heat, you know, we shut the doors, we turn the lights off when we're not in the room, and we, for instance, we don't fly, but we still go on holiday, but we go on holiday in the UK.
Health problems caused by cold homes cost the NHS £1 billion every year, and the rising cost of heating homes means this winter millions more people are expected to plunge into fuel poverty. In Hockerton, living the sustainable way means that each household saves £1,000 a year, and they're keen to help others embrace this lifestyle. They run tours and even give out their material so others can learn to build a home like this. At COP26, world leaders will attempt to tackle humanity's biggest problem, our warming planet. The government is already making commitments, like offering grants for heat pumps and phasing out gas boilers. But Simon wants more of a focus on home insulation.
We have people dying every year, thousands of people dying every year because of cold houses. And that kind of doesn't often get in the news, and we really ought to be building houses that keep people healthy. And so it's such a simple thing. It's such a simple thing to do, to build houses with more insulation at relatively low cost. We should just be getting on with it and doing it.
Like every bit of the climate crisis, insulating Britain's homes would be a big challenge, but holding on to our heat might mean that we don't lose our planet. Will Hollis, reporting from Hockerton in the East Midlands.
Yes, thank you. Well, interesting idea, that, isn't it? Well, keep all your thoughts coming into us on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be back with more of today's top stories and plenty of your views after the break.
Hello again. It's been a wet start to the day for many of us, but the main bands of rain through the afternoon will be moving away, replaced by a mix of sunshine and showers, and it will feel less mild today and more especially through the weekend. This weather front was stuck across northern England and southern Scotland during this week, and it brought an awful lot of rainfall with it. It's still causing issues with further spells of rain moving through Wales, northern England, as well as much of Scotland through the afternoon. In some places, another 20 to 30 millimetres, and of course that falling onto saturated ground could cause some issues. But it's replaced by sunshine and showers, blustery winds pushing those showers into Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, and cooler air follows as well, with temperatures a couple of degrees down compared to recent days, but still above average for the time of year. The wet weather continues there for eastern and northern Scotland for a time into the evening. Clear spells then follow, but another system pushes in, a very lively system overnight actually, across most parts. Very gusty winds, heavy rainfall, could be quite noisy as that arrives. Ahead of that, it's going to be clear across eastern England, and behind it, temperatures dipping to -1 for some sheltered parts of northern and northwest Scotland. Nevertheless, this heavy rain is with us first thing on Saturday. It's moving into eastern England, eastern Scotland as well. It clears to sunny spells and showers for Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest. Some of these showers again on the lively side with gusty winds. But once it pulls away, some decent sunny spells breaking out across the Midlands, eastern England as well. And a cooler day for all, with temperatures back to around average for the time of year. So we say goodbye to that system on Saturday night. Clear spells briefly before the next weather system moves in, a series of weather fronts and wrapped around a developing area of low pressure to bring yet more wind and rain during Saturday. Much of that clearing through during the morning, replaced again by sunny spells and showers. It remains changeable on Monday.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point. Good morning, everybody. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Anaya Falarin Iman, and we're here for the next hour with a show full of all of the biggest guests, the biggest topics, and the biggest talking points.
As usual, make sure you get in touch with your views at GB News. We'll be reading out all of those throughout the show, but first, here's the latest news.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. This is your news at 11 o'clock. The UK hasn't ruled out military involvement in the ongoing dispute with France over post-Brexit fishing rights. The French authorities are yet to release a British scallop vessel detained yesterday for not having a licence. French prosecutors say the boat's captain will be called to court next August. France's ambassador to the UK has been summoned to the Foreign Office this morning to answer questions over the escalating threats from Paris. Talking earlier to GB News, the Environment Secretary George Eustace said Navy vessels would be used if needed.
We want to try to resolve this dispute by getting France to understand and accept that those 55 vessels that haven't been granted a licence, probably aren't entitled to one. And if they're able to offer us the evidence that supports the applications, well, we'd process them. But for now, we're trying to de-escalate this. But we're also very clear that if France carries out the threats that they've made, then we will obviously make a proportionate response.
A serving Met police officer has been charged with child sex offences. 51-year-old Detective Constable Francois Allwidge was arrested yesterday at an address in Basingstoke. He's facing 4 charges, including attempting to meet a girl under 16 and engaging in sexual communication with a child. US President Joe Biden is meeting Pope Francis at the Vatican to discuss the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change and poverty. Mr. Biden arrives in Europe, leaving a fraught domestic agenda in limbo back at home. It's after his fellow Democrats abandoned plans to vote for the president's nearly $3 trillion spending plan. After meeting the Pope, President Biden will travel to the G20 Leaders Summit in Rome and COP26 in Glasgow. Insulate Britain activists have staged another protest this morning, gathering on the M25. Essex police say a number of people have blocked the road between junctions 28 and 29. The eco group claim 14 protesters have caused major disruption on the motorway in several locations. It comes after an injunction was put in place by the High Court banning the group from obstructing traffic. England could soon become the first country in the world to license e-cigarettes as a medical product to quit smoking. They're a step closer to being prescribed on the NHS for the first time under new plans. It comes after the British health regulator updated its guidance for people who want to quit smoking. They say e-cigarette manufacturers can now submit through the same approvals process as other medicines. MPs are warning the Crossrail project is facing an £150 million funding gap. The Commons Public Accounts Committee expressed doubts over how and when taxpayer loans will be repaid. That's after the collapse in fares revenue due to coronavirus pandemic. It's predicted the cost of finishing the project is now at £18.9 billion. Coronavirus restrictions in Wales will be strengthened in a bid to curb infections, which are the highest in the UK. First Minister Mark Drakeford will reintroduce some measures, including guidance around self-isolation. Adults and young people aged 5 to 17 will soon be asked to isolate until they receive a negative PCR test. That's if someone in their household has symptoms or tests positive. COVID passes will also be extended to theatres, cinemas and concert halls. Facebook has officially rebranded itself as a wider company called Meta. It's designed to represent the social media network's expanding business plan into what they're calling the metaverse. That's an online world where people can meet, play and work virtually. The core Facebook service will still remain unchanged. Archaeologists have discovered Roman artefacts during HS2 works in Stoke Mandeville. They made a once-in-a-lifetime discovery of statues and other pieces at St Mary's Church. Dr. Rachel Wood, the lead archaeologist on the site, called the findings significant.
Really rare finds in the UK. To find one stone head or one set of shoulders would be really, really astonishing, but we have two complete heads and shoulders as well as a third head as well, and they're even more significant to us archaeologically because they've actually helped change our understanding of the site here before the medieval church was built.
I'll be back with the latest headlines in half an hour. Now it's back to Patrick and Anaya and to the point.
Good morning, everybody. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Inaya Falarin Imam. We've got one more hour to go for you this week, so here's what's coming up.
Yeah, should the taxpayer foot the bill for hormone replacement therapy? MPs will today debate whether HRT should be free for women going through menopause.
Yes, and London Mayor Sadiq Khan has called on the government to make face masks mandatory on public transport. We'll have the latest.
And reports suggest that GPs have been given considerable concessions from NHS England, what appears to be a clampdown over face-to-face appointments. We'll be speaking to a GP with over 30 years' experience in the NHS.
We will indeed. We have all of that coming up and much, much more across the programme, and you can get in touch with your views, as usual, on gbviews at gbnews.uk. We're going to go to my inbox right now, actually, before we get cracking with some of our many esteemed guests. Lots of reaction, apparently, to e-cigarettes essentially being given out on the NHS, which is actually we've not spoken about yet so far this show, so clearly you guys just feel very passionate about it. So we're giving people cigarettes to make them stop smoking them. Apparently, it's just someone's likened it to giving someone 10 pints a day to stop drinking.
Interestingly, there's been a lot of mixed views on the returning artefacts back to Nigeria and different African and Asian countries. Many people agreeing, saying that actually if the people want it to be with us and it should be a kind of space after it's already been returned. Many people essentially saying that it's the right thing to do, that if you've stolen something, even if it's been 10, 100 years later, the right thing to do is return it. And, maybe that is possibly the right thing to do. But I tend to think that museums are really something that is for the entire world and actually take on a new status. But I'm sure there are hundreds, if not thousands, of these artefacts in Nigeria. I just hope that this one's going to be looked after very safely.
I'm sure it will be. I'm sure it will be. Yes, people saying, people were kind of showing, a lot of people showing your views, actually. Someone said we could send... Well, I do wonder with some of these countries whether or not actually it's to have those artefacts, does that help with your national wealth? Presumably these things are like priceless, aren't they? So if you now are in possession of that, I suppose,
But this is what I was saying, some of these things, I mean, for us it's very rare because there's not going to be many, but actually many of those countries, these are artefacts that do exist in many different parts in different people's homes for whatever reason. But the bronze artefacts are something that is very much part of Nigerian history and is treasured quite strongly.
Yes. Still a lot of reaction coming in to my winking And I've got to be honest with you, some of them we can't read out on air. But yes, they seem to have split the nation. I think we can all agree this is the main topic of the day. It seems to have split the nation as to whether or not I should indeed stop being such a winker. But hey, we'll see how we go. GB Views at gbnews.uk. But moving on, a bill which would make prescriptions for HRT, or hormone replacement therapy, free for menopausal women in England is having its second reading in the Commons today. The private member's bill has been brought forward by Labour MP Caroline Harris, and a rally in support of it is expected in Parliament Square later today.
Yes, well, the bill aims to help the millions of women who struggle with the symptoms of menopause, many of whom end up having to take time off work because of this.
Well, our London reporter Alice Porter joins us live now from Westminster. Thank you very much, Alice. Just run us through exactly what's going on there.
Hi there, good afternoon. Yes, I'm here in Parliament Square because there is a rally with lots of women coming from all over the country in support of Caroline Harris's bill, which is to make HRT, that's hormone treatment that is available to women who are going through the menopause. Many women across the UK struggle with menopause symptoms. Unfortunately, if you're in England, you have to pay for your prescription. You don't if you're in Scotland, you don't if you're in Wales. And Caroline Harris is hoping the second reading of this private member's bill will get her one step closer to getting the bill through and getting the prescription free for women in England. Now, first I'm going to speak to Hayley Cockman, who Hayley knows a lot about HRT because you've been on it for a long time. Firstly, just tell me, how long have you been on HRT and why?
So I've been on HRT now for 26 years. I had a premature menopause at the age of 14. So, yeah, I've spent thousands and thousands of pounds on it over the years.
And how hard has that been for you financially? I mean, obviously it's quite unusual to go through the menopause so early, but not completely unheard of. I mean, what kind of impact did that have on you financially?
Well, at the end of the day, I needed to have these hormones to keep me well, so I just had to find the money to pay for it, obviously. It was sometimes it's a bit of a struggle, but I've always worked, so I've just had the money really to pay for it. But there are ladies out there who unfortunately don't work and things and can't find the money, so yeah.
Now, you've started speaking up about your condition, but you said to me for a long time you kept quite silent about it. Why was that?
I was ashamed and embarrassed of myself, really. I didn't want to draw attention to the fact that I was infertile because of my menopause. And yeah, it was something that people think only happens to older ladies, which I'm living proof that it's not. So, yeah, I just was ashamed of myself, really.
Now, the other person joining me here is Claire Hattrick. Now, Claire runs a blog, a menopause blog, and helps support women who are going through the menopause. Thanks for joining me on a very wet day.
Thank you, Alice.
Now, firstly, you have a lot of people who get in touch with you who are going through the menopause, but also spouses who are trying to support their wives, their girlfriends who are going through the menopause. Just talk me through some of the stories that you've been hearing over the years.
Yes, I think people don't realise that menopause affects absolutely everybody, whether you're a son, whether you're a dad, whether you're a partner. It's not just women. I've got a Facebook group of 10,000 women, and I'm constantly being messaged with women that are suicidal. I've had messages from husbands that their wives have ended their lives. It is not just the physical symptoms, it's actually the mental symptoms as well.
And one of the reasons you've been reaching out to women is because of your own experiences. Just talk me through how difficult you have found the menopause.
Yeah, it's been really, really hard. I'm not your typical menopause sort of sufferer with HRT and hot flushes and things like that. I've kind of done it a bit au naturel with my joint pain. It's been really debilitating. I've struggled to walk. I did do a burst on HRT and unfortunately it didn't do anything. In hindsight, I think if what we knew today, we knew 6 or 7 years ago, my GP at the time might have then made me try something different with HRT, something stronger, a gel, a patch, estrogen, testosterone, something like that.
Because it's important to stress this bill, half of it is about HRT and about making the prescription free for women in England, but another half of it is about education. And Caroline Harris is wanting workplaces, schools, families to be better educated about the menopause. What sort of difference would that have made to you in your experience in terms of the workplace, in terms of families, schools being better educated about the menopause?
I think it's all about support. A lot of it is about support. If people don't know about it, if women are too ashamed, like Hayley was saying, to talk about it, I don't think there's any hope for the male population, and it's also huge in businesses as well. Everybody needs to be talking about this subject, so it makes it a lot easier on the women. Do you agree with that, Hayley?
Totally, yeah.
And finally, what if you're obviously involved with a lot of women on this issue? If people are watching this now and really are wanting resources to get help as they're going through the menopause, what can you recommend?
Well, I've just launched my new menopause help book. It's a very, very simple, easy to read, few pages per symptom. We're aiming it at women under 30 and in their mid-30s to forewarn and forearm them. And also I've got a free website, clipboardclaire.com, which is free for anybody to sign up to, with a lot of, completely unbiased information on it.
Thanks so much. Well, thank you very much for joining me here. There's more women who will be gathering here in Parliament Square as Carolyn Harris is in the chambers as for the second reading of her bill, which would make HRT free on prescription for women in England.
Our London reporter, Alison Porter, thank you for sharing this important story about postmenopausal women.
Yes, interesting stuff, that wasn't it? That's really kind of heartfelt, I suppose, account really of what happened to that poor lady there at the age of 14.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a really important story that challenges perceptions. It's not just women that are, after 40s, 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
It can happen to many different types of women, and actually I think it sounds like quite a good thing for it to be free on the NHS. I mean, there's many things that end up being free. Women, if they are, insecure about their nose or their ears or their breast, they can actually oftentimes get that paid for on the NHS. So why would this treatment not be available?
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Well, look, coming up, could e-cigarettes soon be prescribed by the NHS? According to reports, the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, is backing new proposals in a bid to help people stop smoking. We'll have the latest.
Hello again. It's been a wet start to the day for many of us, but the main bands of rain through the afternoon will be moving away, replaced by a mix of sunshine and showers, and it will feel less mild today and more especially through the weekend. This weather front was stuck across northern England and southern Scotland during this week, and it brought an awful lot of rainfall with it. It's still causing issues with further spells of rain moving through Wales, northern England, as well as much of Scotland through the afternoon. In some places, another 20 to 30 millimetres, and of course that falling onto saturated ground could cause some issues. But it's replaced by sunshine and showers, blustery winds pushing those showers into Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, and cooler air follows as well, with temperatures a couple of degrees down compared to recent days, but still above average for the time of year. The wet weather continues there for eastern and northern Scotland for a time into the evening. Clear spells then follow, but another system pushes in, a very lively system overnight actually, across most parts. Very gusty winds, heavy rainfall, could be quite noisy as that arrives. Ahead of that, it's going to be clear across eastern England, and behind it, temperatures dipping to -1 for some sheltered parts of northern and northwest Scotland. Nevertheless, this heavy rain is with us first thing on Saturday. It's moving into eastern England, eastern Scotland as well. It clears to sunny spells and showers for Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest. Some of these showers again on the lively side with gusty winds. But once it pulls away, some decent sunny spells breaking out across the Midlands, eastern England as well. And a cooler day for all, with temperatures back to around average for the time of year. So we say goodbye to that system on Saturday night. Clear spells briefly before the next weather system moves in, a series of weather fronts and wrapped around a developing area of low pressure to bring yet more wind and rain during Saturday. Much of that clearing through during the morning, replaced again by sunny spells and showers. It remains changeable on Monday.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me live from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Your weekend starts here. My show exists to do three things: to inform, to debate and to entertain. Big guests, big stories and big opinions. And I can't do any of it without you. It's lively and it's a little bit funny. So join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Morning. Now, e-cigarettes are a step closer to being prescribed on the NHS for the first time after the UK's medicines regulator updated its guidance for people who want to quit smoking. Now, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency said e-cigarette manufacturers can now submit their products to go through the same regulatory approvals process as other medicines available via the health service.
Yes, well, the development could lead to England becoming the first country in the world to prescribe e-cigarettes licensed as a medical product, as long as they get approved by the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence.
Well, joining us now to discuss this is Director General of the UK vaping industry, John Dunn. Thank you very much. You see, it was like only yesterday that we were speaking to you. It wasn't that long ago, actually, was it? But
I know, it seems to be popular news this week.
No, absolutely. But, well, look, is this a good thing? I think a lot of people, well, certainly a lot of people are emailing into me anyway, saying, you know, we're already forking out loads of money for our NHS. Do we need to be, you know, getting e-cigs on it as well?
Well, I think, first of all, we've got to look at this in a couple of ways. The first way is, it really is another thumbs up from the UK government on vaping as a good thing to do. So from that perspective, we're extremely happy with it. But as you point out, the NHS is under an awful lot of pressure. And really, vaping products are currently available through normal consumer channels and have been for many years. And there's really nothing stopping doctors at the moment from advising their patients to try vaping as a solution. And in fact, many smoking cessation clinics around the country that are run by the NHS are currently doing that. And also you've seen trials from NHS hospitals that are giving out free e-cigarettes. So although it does have some benefits, we really already have a solution in place for this.
Are there any side effects or detrimental adverse impacts from e-cigarettes? Because it does seem rather odd for, even if it is to get people off smoking normal cigarettes, for a health service to be potentially prescribing other forms of smoking. Are there any health risks from actually e-cigarettes?
Well, first of all, e-cigarettes is not smoking. It's very, very different. And one thing that Public Health England and all of the major health bodies really in the UK have been consistent in saying is that, you know, vaping is not 100% safe. And there's very little things in life that we do that are. But when you compare it to smoking, vaping is at least 95% less harmful for you than smoking. Now, when you consider that about 255 people die every day from smoking-related deaths in the UK, even if we were to convert a small number of those over to a safer form of nicotine consumption, that's a real huge public health win for the UK.
OK. And so, I mean, they've come quite a long way, haven't they, e-cigarettes? I can remember when they seemed to almost first come in, and there didn't appear to be a huge amount of regulation with them at that particular moment in time. But I suppose now this is an incredibly regulated industry, is it?
Absolutely, and the Tobacco Products Directive came in about 5 years ago now. So the UK really does operate under quite a robust regulatory framework as it is. Now, what was announced today is really kind of a step above that. Now, products have always been able to be put through this process, so we really need to take a look at the details of whether that process now has been shrunk down or made easier to use. But currently, it takes about 4 to 5 years for a product to go through this process, and only one product has been successful so far and really failed when it came to commercializing the opportunity. So the devil is going to be in detail, I think, when we see the plans coming out from the government.
Why should the taxpayer pay to help fund people's habits?
Well, there's always the argument that, especially amongst lower income consumers, that having a product available on the NHS would perhaps make it easier for them to make that switch and make that decision. But vaping products, over the years have really come down in price, and an entry-level device that you can get from a local vape store is still very, very low in cost compared to a pack of cigarettes.
OK, John, all right. Thank you very much. John Dunn there, of course, discussing the latest on the e-cigarette situation, which essentially they could be prescribed now on the NHS. He's Director General of the UK Vaping Industry Association. Yeah, I think, to be honest with you personally, I think we already spend so much. We're pumping money into the NHS left, right and centre. It's something like 43% of our entire national spend now is health and social care. And then, do we really be needing to add the cost of them supplying e-cigarettes to that as well?
Well, I mean, the argument in favour is saying that actually normal smoking is much more dangerous and actually ends up costing the NHS in the long run. So if people can switch to something that is 95% safer, and even though it has a cost, obviously having that as prescriptions in the long run, it will actually be much cheaper than the cost it actually causes for people that have serious smoking-related conditions.
Well, there we go. Now, moving on, London Mayor Sadiq Khan has urged the government to make face coverings mandatory on public transport as the UK continues to average more than 40,000 confirmed coronavirus cases a day over a week. Just quickly, sorry, I've actually just seen a picture on Twitter. I'm hoping that maybe our very trigger-happy producers might be able to do something about this, which is Sadiq Khan's latest profile picture, which appears to be him stood next to Mo Salah at some kind of football awards in a room full of people, totally maskless. But maybe we'll be able to bring that up on the screen at some point too.
Yeah, well, the government has so far been resistant to bringing in so-called Plan B measures, which would see the reintroduction of mandatory face masks indoors, along with guidance to work from home and the use of COVID passports. Mr Khan called for Londoners to get vaccinated against COVID-19 and the flu to protect the NHS this winter, and warned that the virus had not gone away anywhere.
Yes, well, joining us to discuss this now is Christian Woolmer, who is a transport commentator, I should say. Christian, how do you feel about this, then? Would you welcome the return of masks on public transport?
I don't think welcome it, because it is a drag kind of wearing them. But there's two aspects to this. First of all, there's the public perception about it, and people are worried that public transport is dangerous, and therefore, at the moment, there's about 50-60% of normal use. And so part of this measure is to encourage people to use it who are worried about it. And secondly, there is a preventative aspect to it as well. It's shown to maybe reduce the risk of, not totally, but maybe 15 or 20% of cases might be saved by having masks. So, if that's the price we have to pay, at least for the moment.
But isn't that argument always going to be used? I mean, we've been hearing that for nearly 2 years coming up now, that actually, well, this is just a little step, this is a little step, and actually it just keeps reoccurring. At some point, do we have to potentially learn to live with the virus?
Yes, absolutely. But there's nearly 50,000 cases a day at the moment. It's gone down to 40. But according to the Zoe app, which is used by lots more people, and it's much more comprehensive survey, there's merely 900,000 cases a day. So the pandemic is still very much on. Of course, when the numbers reduce, yes, we can all take our masks off. And, I find it a pain wearing one in public. But, that's the price we have to pick his wife. And look, compared to other countries, our numbers are much, much higher. And, that's why we need these sort of measures, at least for the moment.
We are testing more people than any other country in the world, though, as well. So, I mean, there is that, isn't there? Would you like to see, though, if Sadiq Khan is, for example, calling on this and mandatory masks on tubes and in public transport, would you like to see him wear a mask when he's in a crowded place confined indoors?
Well, I don't know the particular circumstances he was in. He was socialising maybe briefly with people. It's very different if you're stuck in a tube train for half an hour, strap hanging. And, I've been on tube trains, particularly at weekends, where they're really crowded. And I feel better if everybody was wearing a mask. And yes, it was interesting that the Tory front bench were wearing masks during the budget, despite the fact that many of them have misgivings about it. So, yes, I would expect to see Sadiq wear one more often if this mandatory idea goes through.
But Sadiq Khan has been suggesting people also get the flu jab, and people are saying, well, masks aren't just for COVID-19, they're also for the flu. So actually, you mentioned that we're still in the pandemic, but possibly the flu has been here for so long that this could possibly be something permanent as well because we have the flu. Is that a possibility that you would welcome?
Yes, I must say I have some sympathy with your view there. I really don't think in the long term we can become like they do in Japan, actually, kind of wearing masks almost all the time in public. I think there's a lot of negatives to it, not least that it makes the acts of criminals in the streets kind of much easier because they can be wearing a mask all the time. And those people who cycle around wearing masks and kind of nick mobile phones, it's made much easier by this. And I wouldn't like to see you expect.
All right, we're going to leave it there, I'm afraid, because it's just a little bit of a bad connection. But I think we got his points across, didn't we? Really, Christian Wilmer there, transport commentator, just reacting to Sadiq Khan's call, I suppose, a rallying cry, we call it that, to mandate masks on public transport.
I mean, that has been one of the biggest themes over the last, 18 months. One rule for people that are making decisions, and another rule for everybody else. We talked about COP26 earlier. Telling people not to fly whilst so many people are coming in via plane, so not really leading by example. But the whole theme of this government in terms of the handling of the pandemic has been saying one thing and then U-turning, and it seems that more and more pressure is being put on the government to take tougher, harder and faster restrictions, really.
Yes, indeed. Well, here's what some of you have been saying in our inbox, gbviews at gbnews.uk. If face masks don't work, why do they wear them in operating theatres?
Well, that's something many people have been mentioning, that because they actually wear it only for a certain period of time. They do it in a very sanitised way, whereas we often touch ours loads and wear it for weeks, some people.
Yes. Well, that's true, actually. That's true. I think I've probably got... I actually don't remember the last time I wore a mask, to be fair, but I think there's probably one knocking around in my bag somewhere that's almost as old as I am, I think. And it's probably very much doubt that's protecting anyone. In fact, it's probably more of a danger to me than anything else. But anyway, coming up, we'll be talking about reports of concessions for English GPs to avoid strike action. Goodness me. But before that, here's time for the news.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. Here are the latest headlines. The UK hasn't ruled out military involvement in the ongoing dispute with France over post-Brexit fishing rights. The French authorities are yet to release a British scallop vessel detained yesterday for not having a licence. French prosecutors say the boat's captain will be called to court next August. The US President has arrived at Vatican City, where he's meeting Pope Francis to discuss the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change and poverty. From there, Joe Biden will travel to the G20 Leaders Summit in Rome before heading to Glasgow for COP26. A serving Met police officer has been charged with child sex offences. 51-year-old Detective Constable Francois Aldridge was arrested yesterday at an address in Basingstoke. He's facing 4 charges, including attempting to meet a girl under 16 years of age. Essex police have arrested 10 Insulate Britain activists after they staged another protest on the M25. A number of people blocked the motorway between junctions 28 and 29 earlier this morning. The eco group claimed the protesters have caused major disruption on the motorway in several locations. It comes after an injunction was put in place by the High Court banning the group from obstructing traffic. And England could soon become the first country in the world to license e-cigarettes as a medical product to quit smoking. They're a step closer to being prescribed on the NHS for the first time under new plans. It comes after the British health regulator updated its guidance for people who want to quit smoking. You're right up to date. I'll be back with more on all of today's main stories in half an hour.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point. It's been reported that GPs have secured significant concessions from NHS England in what appears to be a massive climb down over face-to-face appointments as well as patient access.
Yes, recently GPs in England that were members of the British Medical Association threatened industrial action after rejecting plans by the Health Secretary Sajid Javid, which include naming and shaming surgeries that see too few patients in person.
Yes, well, to discuss this further, we are joined now by Dr Tony Hinton, a consultant surgeon with 30 years of experience in the NHS. So, I mean, you know, the NHS has just kind of shed load more cash. It's better funded than it's ever been, you know, and we've got, and still having GPs threatening strike action, and we give in to them. What's going on? It seems like the only people losing out here are patients.
I mean, problem is, it isn't just cash that's needed. It needs proper reform. And I wouldn't say the government have actually climbed down on anything. They're just not going to do some of the things that they were talking about doing, which to me looked as though they were things that were just going to wind up the situation. I think what we need here is to cool the situation down and for things to start to get back more to normal.
Well, isn't that quite easy to say if you're not waiting, you know, months for the result of a biopsy, or you're not living in pain, or you're not living in whatever, you know. I mean, it's easy for us to sit here and say that, but actually, in reality, people are dying.
Yeah, but the thing needs looking at as a whole. So if you look, for instance, at the problems of getting patients into hospital at the moment to have their operations, I was talking to a colleague just yesterday who 2 of his cancer patients had been cancelled because the intensive care unit was full. Now, when I looked at the figures, that particular hospital, they've got 75 intensive care beds. They'd only got 3 patients with a positive COVID test, so it wasn't COVID. And when I discussed it with him, it was basically full of patients that had had very complex surgery done, who would have had very simple surgery done had it been done 9 months ago. And it's just this backlog that's coming through. And the other thing that I think the government is taking too heavier-handed approach on lots of things. So, for instance, this business where they're going to be starting to sack lots of care home workers, that is also starting now to back up to the hospitals, because the hospitals can't discharge patients that either need carers to go into their home or need to actually go into a care home for a while. Because I think what's happened is that the companies running the care homes and the councils running the care homes are now making sure they only have enough patients that they can look after once they have reduced staffing when some of them are sacked. And they're being sacked for no good reason. Lots of them will already be immune. It's nuts, some of the things that are going on.
Dr. Hinton, isn't this the danger of when the government actually takes these heavy-handed approach and then they can potentially be embarrassed because they look like they're having a massive climb down when actually, as you're mentioning, they're just perhaps taking a little bit out of what they originally thought? Isn't it demonstrating some of the dangers of this kind of much more aggressive approach when it comes to negotiating with unions and different public services?
No, it does. I mean, I don't know how many doctors are actually in the BMA. I left the BMA years and years ago because I didn't agree with a lot of the things that it was pronouncing on. It was pronouncing on things like Brexit and climate change and all sorts of stuff. And I want them to be just talking about medical issues. Should be their concern. But the overall problem with the NHS is it's far too management heavy. If I give you an example of when I used to do all-day theatre lists, we used to start at 7:30 in the morning, we'd finish at 6 in the evening, and we'd operate straight through the day without even having a lunch break. And what would happen is that every so often, a member would leave the theatre team, go to the coffee room, grab a sandwich, an apple, cup of tea, come back, and then someone else would do the same. Then the management thought they had a fantastic, brilliant idea that they would save money by cutting out those sandwiches and tea. And so what happened then is everybody had to have a lunch break. So the lunch break would be an hour, but you couldn't start a case for half an hour before the lunch break, take you half an hour after. So that's 2 hours gone out the day. So that would be 1 or 2 cases on every single all-day operating list that is no longer done, that used to be just done. People just, working through their lunch break perfectly willingly, but scuppered by management for some silly thing to save a few £100s.
Yeah, exactly that. But how does this government then knock a few heads together and get that kind of thing sorted? Because there's a lot of this, isn't there? If we say that, like you said there, it's not all about funding. Of course, it's not all about funding. There are systemic failures with it, and there are, there's potential structural issues, etc., etc., etc. How does the government actually get in there and sort this out? Because then they'll just threaten to strike again, won't they?
Well, for general practice, for instance, the government could negotiate a different sort of funding model so that it is based on patients that are seen rather than just patients on your list. And you could have a smaller amount for a telephone or video consultation that is perhaps just for a prescription or something. You could have a larger payment for a patient being seen face-to-face. And you could have a supplement for GPs visiting patients' homes, which has almost stopped completely. It was very common 30 years ago that your own GP would come and visit you at home if you were too ill to go to the surgery. But nowadays, that would be some GP locum who doesn't know you from Adam. That's the problem. And when it's someone that doesn't know you, they're much more likely to just say, well, actually, I think you should just go after casualty. Whereas your own GP who knows your history could maybe sort you out there and then. So there are some simple things that could be done. And it's not rocket science, really. It needs organisation, not just money thrown at it.
OK, well, thank you very much for your time. Dr Tony Hinton there, consultant surgeon with 30 years of experience in the NHS. And I think that's kind of where we are, isn't it? A systemic root and branch reform, in a way, of the NHS may be needed.
Well, the ongoing dispute over fishing licences in the UK waters between French and British trawlers has escalated to the summoning of French ambassador by the Foreign Office.
It comes after France detained a British scallop vessel and gave a verbal warning to another, accusing them of fishing in French waters without a licence. The trawler from Scotland was questioned by police in Le Havre for 5 hours. So, there you see, I can speak French. On Thursday, and the skipper was told that he didn't carry the necessary paperwork to fish in French waters. Now, earlier, our very own Tom Harwood spoke to Environment Secretary George Eustace, who had this to say on the incident.
I think it's the right thing to do in the first instance. The background to this is that on Wednesday, France made a number of quite extraordinary threats that basically they would close ports to UK fishing vessels, be deliberately difficult and obtuse when it came to goods going through the border, and actually politicise the fisheries enforcement process. It's really not what you'd expect from a friend and ally. And so the right thing to do in the first instance is to raise it with the European Commission, as we've done so, and to raise it through diplomatic channels, which we are doing. And we very much hope, obviously, that France steps back from the threats that they're making.
How do you respond to that word that Macron's maritime minister has used, fight? Is that a word that you think is accurate to describe what's going on in the English Channel right now?
Well, I don't think it is, but I also think to make these threats is totally disproportionate. So, to put this into context, since the end of the transition period, we've licensed almost 1,700 EU vessels. Nearly 750 of them are French vessels. It's about 98% of all of the EU vessels that sought a licence have been granted one. There's a tiny percentage of vessels, around 55 in Jersey, and a similar number in our inshore waters, that aren't able to demonstrate that they have the necessary track record, so they just don't qualify. But it's only about 2% of all of the applications. The other 98% have already got their licence. So just to put it into context, we've applied, and the TCA, the agreement in full, we've given a licence to every vessel that was entitled to it, including a very large number of French vessels.
But of course, the French would say it's not that 98% figure, it's around that half figure. They just don't have the paperwork to prove it. A tricky situation, I suppose. In the Telegraph this morning, however, there's been some suggestion of what the UK is considering further than just that summoning of the French ambassador. I want to ask you about the likelihood or the prospect of some of those responses that the UK government is suggested to be considering. A bilateral with President Macron at the G20. Is that something that would really be strong enough to try and de-escalate this situation?
Well, look, as I said, we think in the first instance that using diplomatic channels is the right thing to do. And of course, France, as an EU member, doesn't decide its own fishing policy. That's set by the EU, and the EU represent France internationally when it comes to fisheries. So we're raising it with the European Commission, since they've got a role in making sure France abides by the law and abides by the terms of the agreement. But we're also raising it diplomatically, and we think that is the right thing to do in the first instance. But obviously, if France carries through the threats that they've made, and they've suggested they might be doing this from Tuesday, were they to do that, then obviously we reserve our options to, to respond in a proportionate way in kind.
A proportionate way. Is there anything that you would rule out? The UK has actually deployed the Royal Navy before in terms of fishing disputes. Is that something that you would think to rule out, or is that potentially an option on the table?
Well, I know people often get carried away about involvement of the Navy, but the Fisheries Protection Squadron's the oldest part of the Royal Navy and has always done fisheries work, even when we were in the European Union. So yes, we do have fisheries protection vessels in the Royal Navy, but also other marine assets of that sort as well. But principally, we want to try to resolve this dispute by getting France to understand and accept that those 55 vessels that haven't been granted a licence, probably aren't entitled to one. And if they're able to offer us the evidence that supports the applications, well, we'd process them. But for now, we're trying to de-escalate this, but we're also very clear that if France carries out the threats that they've made, then we will obviously make a proportionate response.
And just finally, the French seem to be threatening to break the terms of the trade and cooperation agreement. They seem to be threatening to deploy arbitrary checks on our lorries to stop our boats being able to dock in their ports. This is sort of perfidious behaviour. Would this jeopardise our understanding and our commitments to the trade and cooperation agreement, to that Brexit trade deal?
Well, look, we are committed to it, and indeed we've implemented it. So we've issued nearly 1,700 licences to fishing vessels because they're entitled to access under the terms of the agreement. I think it would be quite a step if France were to, break the agreement and possibly even break EU law in terms of border control posts and how they behave at those posts. That would be quite a significant step for them, and obviously we'll be asking the European Commission to ensure that its member states abide by the law.
Well, a professor accused of transphobia for her views on gender identity is quitting her post at the University of Sussex.
Philosophy professor Kathleen Stock has said she will be stepping down from her role after a difficult few years. It comes after an anonymous group, reportedly set up by students, launched a campaign to get the professor sacked over her views.
Yes, with us now is student and former president of Cambridge Radical Feminists, Sophie Watson. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Sophie. I mean, what do you make of the situation with Kathleen Stock now quitting the University of Sussex?
Well, I mean, Anti-Turf Sussex, the group who are responsible for this targeted campaign of harassment over the last few weeks, their statement on hearing about the resignation was just 6 words long, and those 6 words were "ding dong, the witch is dead." So obviously that's deeply galling for anyone who cares about academic freedom, the integrity of philosophy as an academic discipline, free speech, any of these things. But that said, it's worth noting that Anti-Turf Sussex, as far as I know, actually only has 16 members, 16 students, 12 undergraduates and 4 postgraduates.
And this is where we are, isn't it, now? This is where we are, I think, as a society. It only takes one person on Twitter to say something about your company, and before you know it, whether it's advertising or whatever it is, it can have that massive impact. It doesn't seem to look at the bigger picture. And I'm just wondering, really, are you concerned about this kind of thing continuing to happen? I mean, if it just takes 16 people with some pretty out there views to essentially halt a woman's career, right? I mean, that's a pretty devastating state of affairs, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, I'm deeply concerned because I think what gets lost when we focus on the bullies themselves is the wider set of conditions that allow them to have this impact. I mean, in the case of Kathleen Stock, I think those conditions are universities failing to implement the free speech policies that they actually have, consistently at least. Academics failing to stick up for, the very principles that give them their legitimacy, like academic freedom. And then also students feeling that they have, this right, feeling that they're entitled to demand the end of someone's career. And I mean, the argument that Anti-Turf Sussex used, and I use the word argument very loosely, is that they're paying £9,250 a year to be there. So somehow they have the right to decide, exactly what their experience is and to exclude anything that they don't like.
I mean, we hear so much about students these days, more often than not, about them shutting down speech. But are there students and young people that do believe in free speech and really want to stand up for free speech? Or are they too scared? I mean, what could a student do who believes in free speech, doesn't support what's going on, but doesn't really know what they can do about it?
Well, Kathleen Stock herself tweeted out a kind of answer to that question, what can you do if you want to help me? And I think what she said was more or less, no more or less than if you hear someone talking about my ideas and mischaracterizing them, just say so out loud. She doesn't want anything more extreme than that. So I think there are 2 things that students specifically can do. And one of them is just, is exactly that. Like, you don't have to engage with these bullies on the same level of sort of self-aggrandizement and high drama. Just stick to the argument and look at the facts and decide what you think, and then have the courage to say so. And I think there are a huge number of students who are willing to do that. And that number is getting higher every single day as I think we get more organised, as we reach out to each other, and through organisations like the Free Speech Champions, which I'm part of and that I know you're involved with as well, Anaya.
Yes. All right. Well, look, thank you very, very much for joining us. It's really interesting to get your views. Of course, as the former president of the Cambridge radical feminist, Sophie Watson, and it seems like such a strange dynamic at the moment, where it's almost like elements of, not entirely, of course, elements of the trans community are then against feminism and vice versa, and it just seems like why can't we all just get along?
Yeah, and you know what? Those students are completely entitled to disagree with Kathleen Stock. They're entitled to, have very strong disagreements, but it is essentially a censorious demand when you're just saying that not only do you disagree, but she cannot work here, if she cannot actually engage in her academic work. That is taking it to a totally different level. And no, you are not entitled to do that. And I think universities need to stand up very firm in defence of free speech or academic freedom, or we're going to lose incredible academics, courageous and brave academics like Kathleen Stock. And that is just completely damaging for academic and intellectual life.
Absolutely. Well, I couldn't have put it better myself. I literally couldn't have put it better myself. Well, coming up after a short break, Isabel Oakeshott is going to be sashaying her way into the studio for the briefing. Thank you very much, everyone who's tuned in, not just today, but this week. I hope you have a lovely weekend. I will actually, cheeky little plug, be doing Tonight Live on Sunday, so make sure you tune in for that. But, yes, have a great weekend, everybody.
Hey.
Hello again. It's been a wet start to the day for many of us, but the main bands of rain through the afternoon will be moving away, replaced by a mix of sunshine and showers, and it will feel less mild today and more especially through the weekend. This weather front was stuck across northern England and southern Scotland during this week, and it brought an awful lot of rainfall with it. It's still causing issues with further spells of rain moving through Wales, northern England, as well as much of Scotland through the afternoon. In some places, another 20 to 30 millimetres, and of course that falling onto saturated ground could cause some issues. But it's replaced by sunshine and showers, blustery winds pushing those showers into Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, and cooler air follows as well, with temperatures a couple of degrees down compared to recent days, but still above average for the time of year. The wet weather continues there for eastern and northern Scotland for a time into the evening. Clear spells then follow, but another system pushes in, a very lively system overnight actually, across most parts. Very gusty winds, heavy rainfall, could be quite noisy as that arrives. Ahead of that, it's going to be clear across eastern England, and behind it, temperatures dipping to -1 for some sheltered parts of northern and northwest Scotland. Nevertheless, this heavy rain is with us first thing on Saturday. It's moving into eastern England, eastern Scotland as well. It clears to sunny spells and showers for Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest. Some of these showers again on the lively side with gusty winds. But once it pulls away, some decent sunny spells breaking out across the Midlands, eastern England as well. And a cooler day for all, with temperatures back to around average for the time of year. So we say goodbye to that system on Saturday night. Clear spells briefly before the next weather system moves in, a series of weather fronts and wrapped around a developing area of low pressure to bring yet more wind and rain during Saturday. Much of that clearing through during the morning, replaced again by sunny spells and showers. It remains changeable on Monday.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays.